So when you talk about entrepreneurs don't retire, entrepreneurs find their next purpose.
The only purpose of a business is to make money for the shareholders. Otherwise, it doesn't exist. Is that really true? Can we question that premise? What if instead of saying, win in the game, win in the competition, outdoing our competitors, owning the market share, that's very much a finite game. Whereas the infinite game, what if we said, we do good and make money, instead of we make money and do good? It says if you have a just cause, then you're always going to want to play the infinite game. And I was really influenced by that because I'm studying prosperity for like 40 years now. I try to take the timeless first principles of prosperity. How do we take these timeless principles and how do we apply them in a world that has a president of the United States calling people traitors and retarded and piggy, the opposite political party who thinks that billionaires shouldn't exist? How the hell do we live a prosperous life with that reality? I see my just cause as
Randy Gage, I am really interested to see where we're going to take this conversation today. You have this such a wide area of expertise and knowledge and experience, and I'm really anxious to kind of dig into that. But let's start with your story. Everyone has a story. I want yours.
Well, I don't know if you want my whole story, but
I want to know because listen, the things that happen in our lives that change us, that inform who we become, that are the things that set us off into whatever direction we're going to be on. Those are the things that I want to hear.
A good place to start. I was 15 years old, sitting in a jail cell for armed robbery and burglary. Teenage alcoholic, teenage drug addict. Obviously made some very poor choices with my life. Got through that, kind of changed my life, turned it around through the help of some mentors and guidance and self-reflection of, hey, I don't like, maybe this, it was working great. Armed robbery, you walk in, 60 seconds, you walk out later, you got $800, $1,000. It works great. Until it didn't.
All right, so do me a favor, set the scene, the year, the place, in terms of the where were you growing up, and what brought you to that, and where did that take you from there?
So Madison, Wisconsin.
Okay.
I was born in '59, so at 15 I was whatever that is, whatever year that is, and I was holding up Kentucky Fried Chickens and stop and go convenience stores because I was poor. I hated being poor. I thought the world was unfair and I was going to make it fair. and that's how, the entitlement mentality of why isn't this wealth more evenly distributed, which of course meant how come the kids I go to school with have go-karts and mini bikes and mommy buys them a car when they turn 16 and they have their own bedroom and they go on cool vacations. And I had a single mom who was trying to raise 3 kids, knocking on doors, selling Avon. And my mom shared a bedroom with my sister and I shared a bedroom with my brother, and the 4 of us shared a 1 bathroom on Allied Drive, for you guys who know Madison. Not the most luxurious neighborhood. It's not Beverly Hills 90210. And I was just so, and like I say, I had drugs and alcohol. And so I just thought I have to equalize things. And that's how I got to that place.
I think, it's in looking back, and you see like things that change your life. Sitting in that jail cell, was there that decision, something's got to change? Or were you still in the middle of life is not fair,
No, because it might have been 6-8 weeks, something. I'm sitting in that jail cell waiting for the trial date with occasional meeting with my public defender lawyer. And I'm spending hours and hours sitting on my cot in my cell. There's a little safety glass window in my door. out to the hallway. There's a clock right there. So I'm sitting on my cot, watching tick, tick, tick for hours and hours. And you kind of have an opportunity to rethink your life. So I was doing some serious rethinking of my life.
So when this whole thing was over, what was your next step?
Fortunately, they have an incredible program, or at least they did then in Wisconsin, to say, hey, if a minor is convicted of a crime, but they get probation and they stay clean until they're 18 years old, we will wipe their record and they can go out in the world and the workforce with a clean record. And I took that opportunity and went out and worked hard and played by the rules and tried to do the right thing. There was a guy who had come in to speak to me when I was in the jail cell. He was a teacher, a father of a girl I went to school with, and she had said, like, go save Randy, he's in jail. And it was one of the most important moments of my life, because one day this guy appears. I don't know him from Adam, and he tells me, you don't belong here. You're capable of great things. Well, I told him he was full of you know what. He should have slapped me into next week, but he didn't. He was kind and generous, and he said, no, I mean, you don't belong here. I've talked to your teachers. They tell me you skip school for 3 weeks straight, and you come in and you can ace a test. Your reading comprehension level is beyond college graduates. You could do great things. And I so desperately wanted to believe him that I believed him. And you know this, Michael, I know you do. Because I believed him, it was true.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, if I wouldn't have believed him, it wouldn't have been true.
Sure.
But
sure.
I so desperately wanted to believe it at that point. So anyway, he was part of a special experimental school program they were doing called the School Without Walls, and he pledged the court that he could get me there, and I had someone who promised to give me a job, and of course I had this heroic public defender who believed in me, and then I had a judge who said, hey, let's give this kid a chance, give him a second chance, maybe he can turn it around.
And so, where did that take you?
Takes me to the restaurant business. I had done, I started as a minimum wage dishwasher, right? But I had worked my way up. And then, so out of jail, I'm working as a cook in a graveyard shift. But Red Lobster comes to town and they're going to open a store. And I want to be a waiter because waiters make big money because they get tips. So I lie about my age. I'm 16. I had a nice little mustache going in at 16. So I lie and say I'm 19. This is pre-internet. Nobody checked anything. And they hired me. And then the place that I was cooking made me a manager trainee and then an assistant manager. And then I was literally running a restaurant, managing a store for Howard Johnson when I was 17.
Wow. Because
they thought I was 20. And I was just like, okay, this is what you do. You become the good corporate guy and you keep getting promotions. And I thought I had the great American dream, because if you're a dishwasher, being a manager, you wear a tie, you've got a big ring of keys. Obviously, you must be very important with all those keys. I thought that was it. I had reached the pinnacle of success. Until I got there and I realized, well, damn, I'm working 90-hour weeks and I make less money than my waiters and waitresses do. And they go home after 8 hours. This is crazy. And then I think, okay, what I got to do is become my own boss, open my own restaurant. Well, here I am, this high school dropout with no money, trying to open up a place. So, of course, it failed. And I went back, earned some money, opened another one. That one failed. So I really had a couple of really gut-wrenching failures as an entrepreneur, but I learned from them and I figured it out. And I did come to the conclusion that I was born to be an entrepreneur, and that's what I should be doing, and I should be working with other people who share that passion.
It's interesting because, as you know, being an entrepreneur means that you're never satisfied, you're never at rest, because your brain is always looking, thinking, how can I make it better? What's the next thing? And it just becomes part of your DNA. But for people who have not lived that lifestyle, it's completely crazy, right? I mean, it's
To the
completely
outsider,
nuts.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
completely crazy.
yeah.
And but what I learned, and I learned from some of the best, and when I say I learned from some of the best, I mean including billionaires. And when I say I learned from the best, sometimes what I learned is what I don't want to do. And one of the billionaires I worked with was the founder of Swatch, the watch company. So meanwhile, I'm being an entrepreneur. I write some books. I become a professional speaker. I'm doing events. And then I get invited to do a program with Nicholas Hayek, who's the founder of Swatch. We did a Central European Business Congress together. So I got the chance to get to know him and work with him. He was in his 80s. So people in your podcast, they're just going to love this story. He's, I don't know what, 82, 84, 80 something. And he's like, he had 18 different watch brands. Because he had Swatch with those little $15 watches, but he had other watch companies that they go for $300,000 a copy. He used to wear 3 watches everywhere he went. You know, he'd have the Swatch, the 50K one, the 300K one. You know, he was like Branson or Elon. He was just a consummate marketer. But meanwhile, he's got 18 companies, 18 brands, and he pits them all against each other. Rat eat rat. And I don't know if you ever read some of those business books where they're like, so I research the guy I'm going to meet with, and I find out when his daughter's birthday is, and I schedule a meeting on her birthday, and if he doesn't show up, I know he's not a serious player. And Nicholas was like that. So I'm working with him, and I say, I do not want this guy's lifestyle. So I learned a lot with him. But one of the most fascinating things I had learned, this time I'm probably 45-ish or something. And as you know, when we chatted before the mic went on, you know, I retired at 40 years old. I had my first midlife crisis right on schedule, and I said, okay, I'm done. I'm going to race cars. I'm going to play softball and drink out of a coconut. And I did it for like 9 months, and I was going crazy. So I went back into the game, right? So now it's a few years later. I'm doing the program with Hayek. We do a press conference to promote the event, and all the media from Slovenia and Croatia and Macedonia and all those places are there. And this young reporter asked Nicholas, so, you know, Mr. Hayek, you're 80 whatever years old and you're worth billions of dollars, you know, have you given any thought about retiring? And he looked at that young reporter like she had just called his mother a whore. And he said, entrepreneurs are artists, and artists never retire. And I was, oh my God, he's speaking to me. He's speaking to my soul, because that's what I had come to believe, but I didn't know how to articulate it yet until he spoke those words. And then I realized, yeah, for me, that's not my life. Like, okay, what's the countdown? How many years? And I bet there's a bunch of people listening or watching right now on this pod who have had that thought. Like, is this really what I'm supposed to do? I'm supposed to count down the years until it's and now I get $980 a month from Social Security, and I'm supposed to just go fishing every day. So it was a real fascinating time for me.
The idea of finding what your next is, it really doesn't matter. I mean, in terms of where you are in life stage, right? It's really a matter of what drives you to purpose, right? And the idea that there isn't one way, there's not one answer. When I talk to people and they say, their life after career is, they play golf. And, and I'm not a golfer, so I can't relate to, to their passion. But I can also not relate to the fact that that is a purposeful endeavor, or that is more than passing the time in a nice social way, which in itself isn't terrible. It's not bad, but is it enough? So when you talk about, entrepreneurs don't retire, no, entrepreneurs find their next purpose. On a personal level, I in my career went from musician to accountant, CPA, to financial services, to financial planner, to entrepreneur, to business owner, to now something else.
Right.
Right? And we all need to find what inside of us gives us joy. And I think that your story is really interesting in that you've gone from purpose to purpose to purpose in the various stages. And as I was reading your bio, and it said, Randy challenges audiences to think critically, question their conditioning, and create prosperity from the inside out. And I think that whole inside out idea is the key there.
100%.
Yeah.
It's what drives everything. And I think there's a book, came out in 2019 from Simon Sinek, the What's Your Why, or
Start with Why.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
Starts with Why. But he had a book in 19, which I never got to at that point, and I only recently came across it. It's called The Infinite Game. Mm-hmm. And it's a brilliant book, and I'm just shocked that I never got to it sooner. Very contrarian take, because he's basically saying, okay, Milton Friedman has told us all, we learned decades ago, the only purpose of a business is to make money for the shareholders. Otherwise, it doesn't exist. That's the only reason for being. Well, he's bold enough and brave enough in this book to say, well, is that really true? Can we question that premise? What if instead of saying, okay, we just want to make money, or we have companies who say, well, we want to make money, increase market share, destroy our competition, and be number one while we do good for our customers and offer them affordable widgets. And that's our mission statement. And he's saying, the order of words kind of matters. And if we're talking about, winning the game, winning the competition, outdoing our competitors, owning the market share, that's very much a finite game. Whereas the infinite game would be, what if we said we do good and make money instead of we make money and do good? And in the book, he calls it a just cause, right? So he says if you have a just cause, then you're always going to want to play the infinite game. And I was really influenced by that because I'm studying prosperity for like 40 years now. I try to take the timeless first principles of prosperity, stuff you would read in The Science of Mind by Ernest Holmes, Prosperity by Charles Fillmore, Allen's As a Man Thinketh, Richest Man in Babylon, let's say. How do we take these timeless principles and how do we apply them in a world that has a president of the United States calling people traitors and retarded and piggy and the opposite political party who thinks that billionaires shouldn't exist and assumes wealthy people are evil because they're wealthy. And we have all the crazy kooks on social media and all this demonization and otherization and polarization. How the hell do we live a prosperous life with that reality? So that's what my book's about, my podcast, the stuff that my work. So I see my just cause as I just want to make the world more prosperous. And I don't believe we do it with handouts and entitlement programs, because if we did as Elizabeth Warren or AOC or whoever wants to say, if we just take all the money from the billionaires and we give it to the poorest 2% of the population, we're going to come back in 2 years and the money's going to be right back where it started, because we haven't changed the consciousness, right?
Right.
So I just kind of repatterned my whole business and said, I'm going to build everything with the just cause first. And then whatever money I make, whatever market share I have, whatever, the people who resonate with my just cause will find their way to my work. And the people who don't, won't. And I'm okay with that.
Right.
And I bet there's a lot of people listening or watching right now who are saying, okay, yeah, I retired from XYZ Corporation, but I'm not done yet. There's more fuel in the tank. I got talent. I got skills I developed. I have passions that I would like to take forward. And maybe it's a new business. Maybe it's starting a nonprofit. Maybe it's starting a movement. But that might be something that they would want to explore.
Sure. So I think the word prosperity is a really interesting word, because, for someone who has accumulated a level of wealth that allows them to say, you know what, I've been on the treadmill, I've raised my family, I've accumulated my wealth, I've got enough. I have prospered, but now how do we redefine the word prosperity? Right? And I think your words, if I've interpreted them correctly, and if I haven't, please correct me, is that we have these abilities and talents and knowledge and experience that we can take and help others, and use use our prosperity to make the world a better place.
You are going to love my next book, but it's not out. I literally just sent, it's number 16. I just sent it to my editor a couple of weeks ago. It's called Wealth Without Apology, and it's a prosperity manifesto. And I really do define what I believe is prosperity in that book. And I do think I think there's actually 4 different quadrants of it. And I think, because there's so much misinformation there's the old tropes, which is, hey, money doesn't buy happiness. Yes, that's true. But let's also acknowledge poverty doesn't buy happiness either, right?
Oh, sure.
Money and material things are a part of prosperity. And if you don't know that, you're being foolish and ignorant, right? You can say, a car just takes you from point A to point B, there's no difference. If you say that, you've never driven a Bentley Continental GT. If you say, well, all the hotel rooms are the same once you turn out the light. No, you've never stayed in an oceanfront suite at the Four Seasons versus the Motel 6 next to the elevator that clanks all night and the moldy air conditioning and the 10-year-old mattress, right? There is a difference. But money, material things is not all of prosperity. They're part of it, right? So what I'm doing, I believe with my work that I don't know that other people are doing, is I'm doing the holistic thing. Like I have an entrepreneurial accelerator program. And yes, I help people grow and scale their businesses and make a lot of money, right? But at the highest level, the people who are coming to me, they don't need to know how to make more money. They made money. They're making 40 million a year, and they're coming to me because the kids don't want to talk to them. Or they, built a company, it's worth $200 million, but their marriage is a disaster, or they know they're 2 cheeseburgers away from a stroke or a diabetic coma, and they realize, or they're like, I've got it, I'm successful, I fly private, I have the beach house, I have the summer house, I'm a benefactor at the opera and the ballet and this and that, but I want to contribute more. And we work with them on how they could be doing more charitable contribution, right? That's the holistic picture.
Sure.
And I think your listeners, your viewers, they're at such a wonderful opportunity moment of their life that they can be having those kind of conversations and asking those kind of questions.
Sure. I know. It comes down to, what do you value? What, at the end of the day, when if you look back and say, as I think most people do at one point or another, is to look back and say, how do I account for my life? Was it meaningful? Was it purposeful? Did I do something good? Did I help other people? Did I, what did I do? What did I create? What are my footprints? What footprints am I leaving behind? And I think, some people who have, plenty, have more money than they could ever spend in their lifetimes, could care less about driving a Bentley. Just not something they value.
Yeah.
And I think helping people understand what it is that you really value, what is it you really care about. What is my legacy, or is it just about money? As a financial planner, I talk to people with, money that they couldn't spend in 3 lifetimes. There was that part of them that was, driving them forward to continue to build wealth. But then the conversation of why? Is it just because it's, the hunt, the competition,
because it's the finite game.
Right.
I got 50 million, but that guy's got 100 million. What do I got to do to get to 100 million? Okay, I got a 58-foot yacht, but that guy's got a 62-foot yacht.
Right.
There's always somebody with a bigger boat.
Exactly. So what are some of the things when, you talk about, rebuilding purpose and meaning in your life? How does one, where do you start?
It starts with questioning your core foundational beliefs that for most people, they formed before they were 8 years old, and they never re-questioned them since. I wrote a book on this topic. It's called Radical Rebirth. It's about killing off the parts of yourself that you don't like to become the highest possible version of yourself, your highest good for you. And I break it down into 6 areas, right, of beliefs. So we've got money and success, marriage and relationship, health and wellness, God and religion, right? These are core beliefs for people, right? So if you grew up and your parents bickered all the time, or one cheated on the other, or one was abusive, they were divorced before you were 12. Before you were 8, you had a core foundational belief about how relationships work.
Sure.
If you're raised in a family of everybody eats Frosted Pop-Tarts and Twinkies and Ho-Hos, and everybody gains 5 extra pounds for every decade of life, and it's just normal that anybody who's 60 is on 10 different prescriptions, and anyone who's 70 is on 15 prescriptions, and anyone who's 80 has 20 prescriptions. If you're raised in that, and everything in your kitchen has an expiration date of 2 years from now, right? You have a core foundational belief about health and wellness at 6, 7, 8 years old that if you're like most people, you go out in the world and you never question that.
Right.
organized religion, God, right? If you were, and I took like a 2-year sabbatical, and I just traveled the world. And one of the things I did during that time was I was studying all of the major organized religions of the world. It was a fascinating time, I must tell you. And I believe the core message of those religions is very similar and very beneficial, which is love and kindness.
Sure.
But I also feel that organized religion has hijacked that message with dogma and doctrines and judgments and hate and intolerance. And so if you're, again, by the time you're 8 years old, if you believe that you have to be reincarnated 188 times before you reach enlightenment, but you're only on lifetime number 161, what is the chance you're going to allow yourself to be healthy, happy, and prosperous? If you believe you're here in karma and you're here in this lifetime to pay penance because you were a camel thief in the last lifetime, what's the chance you allow yourself? If you were taught you were born in original sin and you have to redeem yourself your whole life, and then you're going to get the good stuff in the afterlife.
So,
right? This is insidious, limiting programming. And most people have it before they're 8 years old.
Yeah.
And I know this is a long answer, but this was such an important question you asked, because I'm saying you got to find those beliefs, you got to blow them up, and then you got to replace them with beliefs that empower you.
I love that. I'm really curious. So on your sabbatical, where did that take you?
Everywhere, but mostly I got a place in Australia. I had a place in Sydney, Australia, and I ended up spending that as like my home base for that time. And then I just traveled out of there for wherever. I've been in like, I don't know, 80 or 90 different countries in the world.
So what was the one most interesting or experience that sticks out to your memory?
It was that religious study, because that was not why I went on the sabbatical. I went on the sabbatical because I was questioning my materialism. I had so many cars and watches and homes and shit. I was like, do I own this stuff, or does this stuff own me? And I sold off, gave away everything, and just said, I want to live a simpler life, and I want to find out, the stuff that really matters. And who am I? Who do I want to become? What do I want to do with the rest of my time here? And just along the way that, because I study a lot of spiritual stuff anyway, a lot of spiritual books, it just kind of led me down that rabbit hole.
Interesting. I remember running into this guy. We were at a yoga retreat place up in the Berkshires, and I met this guy, and he was in this kind of very simple, modest car, and he was telling me how he came from a wealthy family, and he just gave away everything, and he said he reduced his life to what fits in like a box, like a 3x4 box, and I just looked at him like, wow, that's radical, to me. Is how did that feel for you when you made that decision to give everything away and say and reject it? How did that feel?
It was so amazing. It came about, I'm in my closet, I'm looking for a different baseball cap because I was going to play as a pickup player with another team in a tournament. So I moved some baseball hats, and then I see 2 watches. And one is a Patek, and one is I don't even know what. But so that was like $200,000 worth of watches. And I realized, oh my God, I had been having some workers in my condo. I was remodeling some things like a year before, and I just bought those 2 watches. So I put them behind these 2 caps. I thought, let's not just leave them laying around, tempt somebody to do something stupid. And then I forgot I bought them. So it's like a year later, and Patek, you don't own a Patek. You just keep it for the next generation, that. So I'm like,
It owns you, right?
Right. And that's what it came to. I'm like, do I really, am I at this point? And I probably, I will admit, I'm a watch whore. I'm a fashionista. I love, beauty and fashion and things like that. There's aesthetic beauty to them to me. So that enhances my prosperity. So I'm okay with that. But I thought, when I have these watches and I've never worn them, I've never had any joy from them. They didn't enhance my prosperity in any way because they were sitting behind a couple of baseball caps. So that's when I just happened to get a letter from a real estate agent that week who said, I have this client, and it turns out he's a sheik from Saudi Arabia. He's looking for a condo in my condo, and he wants in my line because that's where the 3-bedroom, 3-bath ones are and whatever. And he could pay cash money and blah, blah, blah. And I said, yeah, I'll consider it. Here's what I want. And I quoted a crazy number. And I figure if he pays that, I'm going to sell the place. And he said, yeah. And then I said, you know what? If you throw in another $100K, I'll just leave all the furniture here, everything. Just bring your toothbrush because I'm getting on a plane and I'm going out of here. I mean, I had artwork worth more than that in the place. And he said, yeah, okay, I'll take everything. And it was so cool. I stopped in San Diego, was the first stop, and that was one of my favorite. I was thinking about getting a place there. And so I stopped in San Diego on the way to Australia and spent a few days there looking at units and condos and stuff, looking for a place, and found a building I liked, but they didn't have an apartment yet, but I told them when they get one, call me. And then I went on to Sydney, and sometimes I read 3 books in a day. So, I got in the best health shape, physical shape of my life, exercised every day, eating so well, feeding my mind, doing this study. And I shut down my blog, my podcast, my social media, everything, and just said, I'm going to be on sabbatical. It was amazing.
That's a great story. I mean, and so let's just, one of the things also that you talked about is aging with intention, vitality, and wisdom. And resilience.
Well, so I always joke that when I retired at 40, that was my first midlife crisis. If you talk to my close friends now and you say, hey, what's the deal with Randy? They'd probably say, man, I think he's on his 5th midlife crisis or his 6th midlife crisis. I can't tell which, and they all joke about that and they all rib me for that. But I love it because I'm hoping to have 5 more midlife crises before I'm done. I'm constantly reinventing myself like I am now with this, just having this just cause and creating my Breakthrough You coaching program to parallel it, writing my books to continue getting that message out there. All my work channels to that. I'm just loving it. I'm 66 now, so I'm, I could get my Social Security pretty soon, I guess, but it's like I couldn't imagine retiring. Dan Sullivan is the guy who does strategic coach. Yeah, he one of his books, he talks about you retire things when they're broken, right? If the machine is broken and it can't get fixed, you retire it. But do we want to retire people like we do machines? And I think it's a good question for people to think about. And again, because like you say, I don't know. It's not my job to tell people how to live their life. If they say, no, I got my gold watch and I'm going to golf 18 holes every day, and they're happy with that, then I'm happy for them. I just knew that I know that's not for me.
Right.
And I think it's really worth some critical thinking for everyone to say, even, I opened this last book with that story of being in the jail cell at 15 and then rethinking my life at 15. And I wrote in there chapter 1. Like, you may be at a point now to be rethinking your life, whether you're 15 or 55 or 105. It's never too late to rethink your life and say, hey, what's my next adventure?
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And I just to let the listeners know that there'll be in the show notes, there'll be a link to your work, your book, your coaching, or your books, and to find out more about you and what resources that you provide. I'm sure you've got more stories than could fill up hundreds of hours of podcasts.
Hundreds of hours.
I have one last question, and I'm going to offer you the last word. And that question is, what is the source of your greatest joys?
The source of my greatest joy, I think I would quantify it as the challenge of growth. Because as a writer, you see the formulas for writing, right? Like the hero's journey. What's the formula, right? We have this average Joe, and then he gets presented with the world needs you to save it, and we need you to become, Frodo or Bilbo Baggins or Luke Skywalker or, whatever, any of the Joseph Campbell, mythology people. And of course they say, no, I'm just an average guy. And then they begrudgingly say yes, they meet their soul guide or whatever. And the whole point of that, and this is something that has stood the test of time, thousands of years, right? So as a writer, I notice stuff like that. But if you analyze that, you say, what's the theme of that? The theme of that is stasis equals death.
Amen.
No, Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Jason and the Argonauts, none of it works if the protagonist is stagnant, if they're stasis. The only reason they work, why we love those books and movies and operas and plays and whatever about those kind of themes, is because of the transformation. We go through friction. Friction forces us to question our beliefs, our behaviors, our actions, everything. And then we modify, we change, we test, we track, we say, okay, this works better. We grow, we develop new skills, we gain more wisdom, we build more belief. And then we go to the next level. And what happens then? Then we get the next challenge.
Exactly.
And that's how we know we're alive.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. Randy, this was great. And as I said, I want to offer you the last word, so that, and again, your information will be in the show notes. And Randy Gage, I'm super grateful to you. So have at it. The last word is yours.
Well, everything, my Starfleet Command site is randygage.com. And you can find all my work there. My blog is hosted on there. My podcast has the links there. All the books are on Amazon. Number 16 will be out in probably February. I'm waiting for the pub date now, but I think February. But one thing I suggest everyone watching or listening, go to that homepage there. There's a free download right on the homepage. It's a booklet, The 7 Elements of an Abundant Life. And that really encapsulates my whole philosophy about prosperity and how we can take our work, who we are, our health, our relationships, our passions that we want to pursue, and really put them together in a holistic way to create an abundant life. And it's free. Just download the PDF. And I think you all will find that real helpful.
That's awesome. Thanks again, Randy.
Thanks for having me on. Thank you, everybody. Peace.
Peace.